Oh, there we go.
Okay, we are back on.
Excellent.
Sweet. Thank you all. We're back. We'll get started on 54-45, planned unit development.
And Commission, I'd actually like to, I think it would make more sense if we skip to the site development plan first,
Okay?
which is the next section.
Don't listen to me, listen to Carlos. We're gonna go to the next section, development plan.
All right. Does it help for me to share my screen, or is that irrelevant?
No,
I think it's okay
Okay.
for us in the room. You might share it for Vicky. I don't know if
All
it
right.
makes a difference for you, Commissioner Williams.
I'll ask her when she gets back on. It's a little bit easier for me to see all of you without it, so I'll leave that off until Commissioner
It's
Williams.
here. I have a hard copy right in front of me, so it's fine.
Okay, great.
yeah.
Great.
Good deal.
So we're skipping to 5456, the site development plan. This is page 35. I want to go over this first because the PUD kind of builds off of this kind of process. So we spent some time thinking about how should what was once called site plan and concept approval, how should we kind of structure the site plan and concept approval and the PUD process? What we decided is that the site plan and concept approval kind of change into the site development plan process. Okay, this is a little bit of a change here. The purpose of this is still to evaluate moderate and higher intensity development proposals, which will likely impact the neighborhood or areas of the village. And so it creates this process where the planning commission and later on the village council can kind of mitigate some of those adverse impacts, can weigh a variety of different kinds of issues, and figure out whether this kind of approval, should be approved. So how this process works is it would apply to, right now, it would apply to multifamily residential development more than 10 dwelling units. And so this would go through this process. It would apply to new commercial, so industrial, manufacturing, any kind of size, all of those would go through this process. Additions to existing commercial, industrial, and manufacturing more than 10,000 square feet. So we're kind of saying that some of these are becoming a bit more, complicated. They might impact the neighborhood. We don't want these to go straight through to the building permit process. We do want to have some of that review. We want to have some of that public hearing. We want to have some of that process there. So this is how the applicability would work right now. But it kind of changes some of the review process. Still make sure that everything works with the code, but it streamlines how the review is kind of done. One of the first questions that I have is, and this is something that staff and us were talking a little bit about. So for the applicability here, we're kind of saying multifamily residential that results in more than 10 units. We're also wondering if there's some kind of thing around building and sensitive land that we should include. We didn't have a great way to define how this should work, and maybe it doesn't need to be there, but I wanted to bring that up as kind of a remaining question that we have on that. Staff, we probably talked about this, 6 months or a year ago. So if there's a development there, that might also come from you. But that was kind of a remaining question I had is it right that at 10 dwelling, so the subdivisions are already going through their separate process, right? If somebody wants to do a subdivision, it already goes through a separate process. So now we're talking about how do we want to catch things before they go to building permit? How do we want to provide more of that community review through this process? So again, that's where we establish this kind of level, this kind of applicability here, this threshold. But I want to hear from the planning commission or if staff have any additional suggestions on whether this is the right threshold.
Yeah.
Multifamily more than 10, new commercial, and then additions that are more than 10,000 on commercial, industrial, manufacturing.
A quick question for me real quick, and then open it up. I know that we define multifamily residential elsewhere in the code, and I think we used 5 units as the breaking point. So this is just saying for larger ones, what happens between 5 and 9? I think.
So between 5 and 9, that would go straight to building permit.
Okay. I think my opinion is to keep it consistent because we handle those differently, if I remember correctly, in the conditional use. And then the zoning. But subdivisions are in a different section he was talking about.
But it'd be very similar if there were five. Carlos, like the major subdivisions that are 5 homes or greater, then the PUD could be consistent with that.
Yeah. So yeah, if we wanted more consistency, we can make it five units. If we wanted to encourage more housing or make it a little bit easier to build between 5 and 10, we could keep it at 10. That's up to the commission. You know, that's entirely a debatable choice there. Whether we want to kind of have a little bit more consistency there, whether we want to make things whether we want to encourage more of that kind of development. You know, it's easier if you could skip this process and just go straight for building permit. It makes it a little easier, right? So if you could kind of skip
Right.
this and do between 5 and 10 without coming to planning commission, that makes it easier. That could be an encouragement. But if we wanted to have more consistency or a little bit more review, it would make sense to make that 5.
Yeah, I'll have my 2 cents. Building 5 units and building 10 units is material not different, in my opinion, just because of the loans that you have to get, the zoning that already has to be predefined there, and the work that has to be done. So I would try to keep it more consistently at 5, at the 5 unit breakdown, because that's what federally the housing department sees versus small multifamily versus large multifamily is 5 units. And the types of loans you can get are around that 5 unit mark. So that's why I would be consistent with it. And I don't necessarily know how many instances where we have folks trying to build 5 to 9 units in the village, but open to other comments by the commission.
Well, I'm guessing, in the 5 to 9, is that easier to construct like workforce housing? If it's in 5 to 9, or are those generally larger developments?
That's a good question. I know that the proposals or the other workforce housing that the village has looked at has been greater than 9 units to date, so
Okay.
it would still go through the process,
They'll go through the process.
right?
Well,
Generally, it's pretty hard to build small multifamily, which, you know, you could kind of say, well, there's not going to be a lot of it, so it doesn't really matter too much. Some people might say, because it's so hard to build and it's kind of this like missing middle, like we want to actually encourage that more. Again, you know, I don't have a political suggestion on what you should do here, but I would agree that it's not too common that you're going to have a lot of these smaller units, smaller development, but they are kind of difficult to build, and so I think either way would be valid.
So we better off being consistent?
That it's easier to build smaller than bigger?
I did it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You did a 8 unit, right?
Rather
did
stick with that
10 and
consistency
10.
because
Yeah.
our last couple, remember Jesse and Glenn, there were not that many units, but it still was pretty controversial.
Okay.
So
Consistency at
on
5
the
is,
side of the consistency for 5, yeah. I mean, if we're trying to, we've been trying to do that through this whole process.
Just keep
so
it consistent.
Why not keep it consistent?
that's would be my opinion as well. And 5 is generally perceived as a different type of development when you look at, not that it should impact it, but financing terms generally. So I think we're gonna do 5, Carlos, for
Okay,
consistency.
sounds good.
Unless there's anybody that objects. Okay.
So let me put a note in here. 5 units. And that actually, I think that solves my question too, this question about building in sensitive land. My assumption is that if we just do 5 units, we don't really have to get into that, like, what's the middle ground if it's in sensitive areas. I think we could kind of just say 5, and keep that simple.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if you're building in either what could be potentially a 404 Corps of Engineers property or flood zone, there's already regulations in place to
Exactly.
do that.
Exactly, there's already all that stuff.
No sense reinventing the wheel.
You could argue the entire mountain is a sensitive land, you know? I mean, there's only so much buildable land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at one point in time, the point of some of this was applying to all development, it said. And it's like, well, is this actually applying to all development? No, it's not.
Yeah.
So we try to define that. So that's the applicability we'll use now. 5-unit multifamily, new commercial industrial manufacturing, or additional of 10,000 square feet or more.
Okay, I have a question on that. C, you're talking about additions to, does that mean their existing use is 10,000 square feet or their addition is 10,000 square feet?
This would be additions.
Is that the
The
property?
greater
or
than.
the-
And an
This-
addition greater than 10,000, shouldn't that read greater than 10,000 square feet? Or I guess it does more than, yeah, never mind. But
You know,
yeah,
but I think you've got a good point. I think you've got a good point.
because say if you have a small, a small commercial, I don't know, say you've got a small commercial, maybe like an RV park or something that's got place for 5 or 6 units and they want to expand it to now they can put 50 units there. But their initial, I guess is the addition, is it based on the additional footage they're asking or their existing footage that they already have? It's addition. So it,
Yeah, I think it was for the size of addition. So it would be 10,000 square feet of additional square footage.
all right. That
But I
answers-
think that's also open to debate, right? So we could say, I think the thing I was considering was if you've got an industrial manufacturing or commercial addition, right? You already have a business there, you're already operating that, and you want some kind of shop space or something like that. At what point in time should that come back to the planning commission? We were kind of discussing 10,000. It could be greater if you want those easier. If you want to make it easier to build, it could be a lot smaller if you want a little bit more control there. But that is, that's discretionary.
Yeah, I'd say leave it where it's at now and see what comes.
Sounds good.
It's also an easy thing to change, right? It's one number. So it's easy to change in the future if you want to change that from 10 to 3 or 5 or 20. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we'll keep that. So criteria. So the criteria here, staff go through and staff make sure that the application is complying with code requirements or has a reasonable expectation that it can comply with code, building permit, technical review processes. It doesn't mean that they need to have, their entire landscape plan already figured out. It doesn't mean that they need to have all of their engineering figured out. Just needs to mean that there's a reasonable expectation. Staff have a reasonable expectation that it can, right? You're not seeing a lot of problems there. It shouldn't be coming back for a variance kind of thing. The staff go through that criteria and first try to make a recommendation on their side. And then planning commission go through and planning commission have this new criteria here that tries to balance the positive and negative impact of the community. And so we've got a list of different criteria here. Again, substantial compliance with other kinds of regulations and policies, sufficient compliance with a reasonable expectation that code requirements can be met, what the effect is on health, safety, and welfare of neighbors and users, of the applicant, village resident, impact to vulnerable or sensitive individuals. So kind of evaluating a lot of those and figuring out, is this a good proposal for the community or not? The planning commission would make that evaluation.
Okay.
Questions on some of those criteria and considerations there?
No, looks good.
Looks good, yeah.
Okay. So how this would work is the applicant comes to staff, has a pre-application meeting, then applies, right? We could get rid of, the several pages of application list, but they apply with the planning administrator. Planning administrator makes a decision. This is now page 37. So the planning administrator is reviewing based on that criteria and making a recommendation to the planning commission. Skipping down a couple pages.
So all of these sections like 37, 38, 39, that all goes to what would become part of the application in the planning?
Correct.
They'd have those,
Yep.
would be the criteria that would be supplied.
Yep.
So that doesn't go, it goes out of here, but goes to the application process, so,
Yeah, we
okay.
don't need to codify it.
Correct.
Don't need to codify it, it just needs to be part
Yep.
of, okay, that answered an awful lot, that got rid of a whole bunch of my
Yeah.
questions.
So let's go down now to page 40. So page 40, right, planning commission now has that review and hearing. No substantive changes, right? It's a normal planning commission review, public hearing. You're listening to different people. You're approving or denying based on applicable criteria. So that's all kind of standard. Yeah, that's the end of that section. Okay, so that's through 41. So all of that stuff there about, all the minor amendments and minor variances and stuff, all of that is covered in the general process. Reapplication is covered in the general process. Notifications and all that stuff is covered in the general process. So we're able to remove a huge amount of all of that.
Yeah, and all that folds over to the actual application.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So back to.
So any
35.
questions with that kind of process, right? This is going to be the most common process that's probably coming forward to planning commission. When someone wants to, or maybe I shouldn't say the most common. This is going to be kind of a bread and butter process, though. Someone comes forward, they want to do a new commercial building, they want to do some kind of expansion, they want to do some multifamily. It comes to the planning commission, it goes through the site development review process. That's what that would be.
Yep.
Yeah, as long
Okay.
as I get all the information from, planning department on what's required, I don't see any reason to
Yeah.
get in the code.
Yeah. And again, the process here isn't for the planning commission to do a building permit review or a technical review. It's just kind of saying, can this get to the building permit review or technical review process? Planning commission evaluates it for the impact of the neighborhood with sufficient understanding that it will probably, go through a building permit or technical review process. You don't actually have to review that in this process. So does this kind of work with the neighborhood? Then some of those technical aspects are dealt with later in the technical and building permit section. So it doesn't have to be a redundant process there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
I think we're in agreement down here, so let's jump to
Okay.
planned unit development.
Yeah, so let's jump to planned unit development. So how planned unit development works, so we changed how this works a little bit. What happened before was, and let's skip to page 1. Okay, so look at page 1. Planned unit development under the procedures here.
So page 1 in
Yeah.
the packet where the table is,
Yeah, so we've got that table.
division.
So originally planned unit development, there was the concept plan that went to staff and then planning commission. And then there was a preliminary development plan that went to staff, planning commission, and village council. And then there was a final development plan that did staff, planning commission, and village council. How we changed this is that there would be the concept plan. So the concept plan would be staff and planning commission, and optional to village council. And then the development plan, which is staff, planning commission, village council. And then that's kind of done for the public hearing process. And then it would just be a meeting with staff to get the final construction plan before actually going for building permit and stuff like that. So let's now go to that process.
And Carlos, before we jump in, having the village council as optional and having the approval of the concept plan initially is just really to determine, hey, do we even want to pursue this path? Do they want to develop down this path?
Exactly.
Okay.
If you're looking at the concept and the concept should be, squiggly lines, like sketches, a bit more than, we want more than squiggly lines, right? But somebody should be able to come to you and say, I haven't invested a lot into this idea yet, but I want to build a 10-story building, right? they should be able to come to staff and staff could say, hey, I don't recommend this, but it works with code. And they could come to planning commission and planning commission might say, this is not going to pass whatsoever. All right, now you could drop it, right?
Yeah.
If there's something where maybe, you want to move the driveway 10 feet or something like that, it gives that an opportunity to get advice for the development plan. So that's how that would work for the planned unit development. All right. So 27, page 27, planned unit development. We talk about the purpose here, talk about the applicability. Nothing's really changing with that stuff. We create the new criteria. The new criteria, again, is mostly summarizing a lot of previous considerations. I don't think there's a lot of changes with this stuff. Administrative review is mainly looking at the technical consideration, making sure that it's conforming with the code, reasonable conformance, or that it could kind of pass eventually. Planning commission, village council are actually looking at more of that discretionary process, how that's going to be related to village well-being. Any questions with some of the criteria there, the administrative or PC and VC criteria?
All good, let's continue.
All right. So the process, this lays out the process a little bit. Kind of already described it, but basically you'd have that concept plan, which is a preliminary review, site plan sketch, some concept rendering, approximate mapping, approximate land use. Again, we're not talking about technical design, we're just talking about an idea. Can this be a good concept? You have the administrative review, planning commission review, and an optional village council review. That's that first step. Any questions on that concept plan process? If not, I'll move to development plan.
Yep.
So after it gets through development plan, or after it gets through concept plan, we've got the development plan. The development plan, this is where it builds off the site development plan idea. So the development plan here is kind of the same as the site development plan process, right? It's an opportunity for planning commission and village council to look through the development plan, see how it's going to affect the neighborhood, how it's going to affect the community, review that and either approve it, deny it, or have a approval condition that staff would have to make. And so this would be, again, a lot of red lines here that we got rid of for the submittal requirements. All that's consolidated, page 29, page 30. On page 30, we've got the regular public hearing for planning commission to go through, getting rid of a lot of those requirements on page 31. Village council review on page 32. So this is where the village council would go through and just make sure that it's kind of working with their overall vision for the community, for the village. And then instead of reviewing that kind of a third time, the final construction plan would just be done by staff. And so that would be for staff to make sure that all of the comments from planning commission and village council and all that stuff, all of the technical considerations, all of that are all packaged together. Staff would approve that final construction plan before it goes to building permits and other approvals. So it's a changed or streamlined process, but it's not, I don't think it's too different from what's kind of already happening. It still ensures that all the code requirements are met.
And that the public can provide their input at least.
Right.
At least three times.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so my understanding, the stuff that's redlined out, the preliminary development plan, page 29, basically carrying through to 31, 29, 30, all that becomes part of what's, the applicant gets that as when they approach saying, hey, I need to develop a site plan. That's all part of the site plan application. Am I understanding that
Right.
correctly? Okay.
Yeah, site
Right.
development.
Okay. And then I guess my other question gets to is when it talk about reviewing the plan, there's a whole list of criteria on page 31. Is that something that the Because it specifically said the planning commission shall consider the following, and it went, I don't know, through 10 or 20 different.
Things like site drainage, grading, screening,
Yeah,
things like that, yeah.
Where is that addressed with it being redlined out?
Yeah, so if we look at the criteria, the earlier criteria, so this is on page 27. So on page 27, we already have administrative review is already going through and figuring out, is there reasonable conformance with grading and drainage and screening and water requirements and height requirements, setbacks, all of those things, right? So administrative review is already able to do some of that stuff and able to give a recommendation to the planning commission. So the technical requirements are taken care of in that C1 on page 27.
C1, okay.
The more discretionary compliance is at C2 on page 27, right? 27, 28. That's where planning commission and village council.
Okay.
Sure, if you disagree with staff on how, grading or drainage should work, maybe, but that's usually staff, right, that are figuring out, grading and drainage and the technical requirements. So this is more, does this work with the long-range plans of the community? Is this balancing, existing and proposed uses? That's very discretionary. That has to remain with the planning commission.
Yeah, I get that. I guess I'm just wanting to make sure that whoever has the ability to get the criteria that the staff will be judging it by online. Because this is right now, it's online, and you're aware of it, it's a little confusing to follow. But what I don't want to see is language go away where they can't access it online. And not, once this is redlined out of the code, it's not on the website anymore.
Yeah, and I think the pre-administrative meeting with staff would help them identify those things.
I was gonna say, really, they'll give 4 if they do their pre-administrative hearing
Right.
with staff, so now they're gonna go 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, but part of it too, for me, the thing that is, even though this is clunky, the information's there available online. Like, if I'm a new developer or whatever coming to town, I can read and look at this stuff and then reach out to the people here. If this is totally gone, I don't necessarily know that, and I've seen properties, let's just say, that people will just go, oh, well, I didn't know that, and you.
Allsup's tried to pull something similar to that with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the only challenge I have, is that there needs to be a way where this, whether it be linked to it so that somebody can, go and, hey, this is what the criteria they're gonna look at. Not just, oh, I have to go to the meeting. What if they decide, no, I don't wanna go to a pre-staff meeting, I'm just gonna go do it. People do that. I've seen that happen particularly where I came from in Georgia. But I mean, it's one of those things that's the only thing I don't want to see is when you.
I think that's fair. I think as a general, there might be a way to update the language online to include some of these items for educational purposes. I don't know how many people are going to the code to get this information rather than, I feel
Well,
like.
it also gives you a position where you can say, listen, it's all online.
True, yeah.
You can't plead, as a judge once explained to me, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. And if it's available and transparent, that's better for everybody. May not like it, but it's better for everybody if it's available. And that's what I'm saying right now, you can get it. It's difficult to weed through. I'll grant you that, which is why we're here. But I don't think you want to lose important things like that can be accessible.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think how this is structured, I mean, with the concept approval, then the development plan approval, I think that kind of makes sense. With the concept approval, let's say that the applicant forgot that they had to address some kind of, let's say grading, right? They didn't realize they had to address this grading consideration. It's going to go to staff. Staff's going to review it. Even if that doesn't happen in the preliminary process, it's going to happen through the concept review process that's going to come up. If staff doesn't think that it will work through the in the concept plan, they don't think it'll probably be able to move forward once they start, doing their technical stuff. The applicant might decide to withdraw, might decide to postpone because they need to get more stuff together and amend that. Or maybe they just want to go through forward anyways and they'll figure it out later, right? They come to planning commission, you're going to see, staff doesn't think they could comply with the grading. All right, planning commission is also going to say, hey, That's definitely something you've got to work on. When they come back for the development plan, right, and now they've got a little bit more of their technical stuff worked out, staff's going to review it again and say, hey, I don't think this is going to work with the development plan. Planning commission gets to look at it again and try to figure out, do you actually want to approve this? If you did, because you thought they could, village council would also have to say that. And then they'd go to the site, the construction plan. And in that process, they still have to do that. They're getting multiple notifications about kind of increasing requirements. If an applicant's deciding to disregard those, that's on the applicant.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
Or it could be, denied. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that.
Excellent. I don't know if there's any other comments on the PUDs.
No,
Okay.
then we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we got through those two. Those two were that was the main substantive changes. That's where, changing some of the ideas of how this stuff are working to make it, getting the same product, but making it a lot easier to do for applicants, staff, reviewers.
I agree. Carlos, and don't take this the wrong way. Take the win and, walk on down the road. We gave you the thumbs up,
Yeah.
Let's jump to annexation and then we can vote on all three.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So annexation, page 42. We've got the purpose. We got rid of this general section here because that's going to be part of the review considerations. Kind of just kept a lot of the existing language here. The criteria. This is where we moved that what was once generally to just move that down. So that's part of the criteria there. Added some criteria for some consistency and clarity. The process, if you look at the code right now, the process doesn't make too much sense, or at least how it's formatted is a little bit clunky. But we kind of just listed out what some of those are. So having the annexation petition, there's already going to be the submission requirements, but we did want to highlight again a couple of those: the description of the property, acknowledgement of property owners, proposed initial zoning. So we've got those sections. The rest of this that's deleted, again, would move to general submission criteria. We've got that thing around statement regarding adequacy of infrastructure, and copy the proposed annexation agreement, so maintaining that. So reducing a lot of the text there, not reducing the requirement. Skipping to that next page 44, so administrative review and staff recommendation. Heavily revised, but not really any substantive changes. Planning administrator still provides a report there about kind of analysis with comprehensive and long-range plans. So thinking about the planning side, public works talks about infrastructure and public services. So both of those kind of have their side of that review. Legal counsel has their review on that. The annexation petition is distributed to other parties who can also kind of weigh in on that. You've got kind of those four different areas: planning, public works, legal, and kind of other technical experts who might want to weigh in. So that would form different staff recommendation periods there. Then you've got, typical planning commission review, not anything substantive. Village council review, again, not really anything substantive. And then annexation, and how some of that the final petitions would work. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, the only question I had on that was in the purpose. Is that language out of code? Because it's a little confusing.
A1 is what you're talking
A1?
about? The kind
Yeah,
of-
that's just existing. I didn't touch that. We certainly can. Yeah, with how many changes we were making to the annexation area, I was kind of wary of making too many red lines here, and trying to get into some of the specifics here. I wasn't sure if this had to be something that legal was kind of protective about, so I kept this as is. But we can certainly change it provided that staff and legal get a good Good look at
Yeah,
that.
it's just, it's one very, very long run-on sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm not sure what the. I got a question.
Okay, Bart has a question too.
My question is annexation always between the village and a petitioner? Or can the village decide that, you know, they want Alpine Village because they want their water and one thing and another and put them on sewer and get return flow credits and things of that nature? That's just an example.
Yes, it did.
But Alpine Village might not be wanting to petition to do such. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's not necessarily,
The village can be the applicant, can they not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Southern Park.
Yeah, the challenge though you would get into then is if the residents didn't want to do it, but the village didn't do it, then you've got, you know, that, you'd never get an agreement signed,
Yeah,
would be my guess.
And the reason, there's a similar circumstance, Santa Teresa tried to annex Southern Park, and they were the applicants. And it's already, through the statute process, the village just becomes the applicant then. And for the legal counsel's consideration and public works consideration, schools considerations and all that, that's what got it stopped, was the schools and public works.
Because, yeah, they couldn't support, yeah, they didn't want it, couldn't support it, yeah.
okay.
Okay, I guess in the
I
first,
understand the applicant part of it now.
That's a good question.
yeah, well, and we've got that annexate, we've got that statement in the criteria for the decision about that.
Yeah, whether or not. it can be
Petitioner has
supported.
to provide the evidence that it doesn't impact any of that, so. Yeah, I was just the first part A was just a little confusing, and it sounded to me like they're trying to say something about water rights or providing the water rights. And I don't know if that's the petitioner having to do that.
I think it,
And that just wasn't clear to me, if that's, I mean, because water rights are big, like say, are a big issue, and if that first portion is meant to say that the petitioner is to, be able to provide that and the water rights, then it needs to say that. It doesn't to me, and I'm a little confused, just long one, it may legally be the right language, but I don't know if that's the right language.
But you and Commissioner Byers both hit on something. If, and I'm using Alpine Village, whatever, if they had the water rights, and we all know how expensive they are versus irrigation and domestic, sometimes cause and effect makes you go after those water rights if nothing else, you know, so. Well locations.
yeah, I think that this is saying you have to have water rights or an arrangement of water rights by the petitioner.
Right.
So you either have to acquire it to, I think what you all were getting at.
Okay, as long as the legalese is correct, and that's what it's saying, that's, again, back to if that's statute or what it is, I mean, it's a long-winded sentence, that's
It
why,
is.
to Vicky's points in the past, I go, oh, okay, there could use several periods in that. But if that's the language you need to say that, yeah, the petitioner must provide the water rights or the access to the water rights, then
Yeah.
that's fine, if that's the intent.
Okay. Any other comments on annexation? I think we're pretty good there, so I would entertain a motion to approve 54-45, 54-46, and 54-47 with the changes discussed.
So moved.
Got it.
Second.
A motion and a second. Let's do a roll call. Vote.
Commissioner Baugh,
Aye.
Commissioner Byers,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye?
Commissioner McElina,
Aye.
Commissioner Rigsby,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Is that a yes, Vicky? I think you're muted.
Aye, sorry.
Thank you. No problem.
No worries.
motion carries.
Excellent. I think, Carlos, Phyllis, keep me honest, but I think those were the extent of the public hearing items that we had today, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
if it was, we got through all of that.
And we have one more module after this?
The next module is all of the other regulations that you have, the sign ordinance, the landscape ordinance. We didn't change those particularly, but we did change some language in them. The forester had some additions he wanted to make. So there's a few things, and that should be a quicker review that we can cover next month.
Sounds good. I don't know if I believe you about the quicker review, but here's to hoping.
Well, you'll see what's changed.
Sounds good. All right, thank you both. At this time, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll move to.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We'll move to the community development report. Any report?
Huh? It was included.
In the last meeting? Okay. All right, that's perfectly fine. Commissioner comments, anything to comment on? Okay, I will entertain a motion for adjournment then.
A motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Now you guys are happy to make motions. Uh-huh. We can, I don't think we needed a roll call. There's no dissent. All right, we're adjourned.
Deal.
Thank you all. Thank you, Vicki.